Welcome to Compelling Topics, the only channel dedicated to the perspective of leading researchers from the Italian independent scene. Let's turn your minds on. In this extensive and thought-provoking talk, Corrado Malanga explores a wide range of interconnected themes that span physics, mathematics, consciousness, sound, and the structure of reality itself. Moving between scientific references, personal research, and philosophical speculation, he presents a framework in which the universe is described as geometric, vibrational, and holographic in nature. From the controversial debate surrounding the 432 Hz frequency to the development of the Triad Sound Test, Malanga outlines more than 20 years of theoretical and experimental work aimed at understanding the relationship between sound, brain coherence, and human awareness. His reflections extend beyond acoustics, touching on quantum physics, symmetry, fractal structures, the nature of time, and the role of consciousness as an active participant in reality. The conversation gradually expands into broader questions. Are recurring events in our lives governed by mathematical patterns? Is the universe structured like a musical composition? Can awareness alter the way we experience time and duality? And ultimately, what role does individual will play in shaping both personal and collective destiny? What follows is not merely a discussion about sound frequencies, but a comprehensive worldview, one that attempts to bridge geometry and spirituality, physics and perception, science and introspection, in an effort to decode what Malanga considers the hidden architecture of existence. Malanga begins by addressing the criticisms he has received regarding the topic of the 432 Hz frequency. He emphasizes that he is always open to criticism, provided it is well-founded and supported by solid arguments, especially when it comes to numbers and mathematics, areas in which, he says, one cannot go against facts as one might with a political opinion. He recounts having written an article years ago on his website in which he addressed the 432 Hz issue from a technical standpoint. He explains that today the standard tuning is 440 Hz, but in the past, many instruments were tuned to 432 Hz. Ancient music, linked to the Pythagorean tradition, was based on simple mathematical ratios. Dividing a string in half produces the same note an octave higher. Pythagoras formalized this principle through a mathematical relationship based on powers of 2. The problem, Malanga explains, is that a scale constructed in a pure manner generates resonance phenomena between strings, creating sonic confusion. For this reason, modern music adopted equal temperament, small variations in frequencies that prevent unwanted resonances while maintaining, to the human ear, the perception of the same note. At this point, he introduces an experimental element. He cites psychological studies in which groups of people listened to the same musical piece tuned to 432 Hz and 440 Hz. According to his report, the majority of participants perceived the 432 Hz version as more harmonious and pleasant. For him, this experimental data demands an explanation. He then says he developed his own mathematical algorithm. The formula he proposes links the frequency to pi with a full angle of 360 degrees multiplied by pi superscript 2. Applying the formula, the value that produces an exact 360 degrees angle is 431.85 Hz, practically 432 Hz, a difference imperceptible to the human ear. According to Malanga, this is not a coincidence. Music is mathematics, but above all, it is geometry. In his view, the universe is geometrically structured and governed by laws of symmetry. Symmetry, he says, is connected to energy. Greater symmetry corresponds to lower energy. The fundamental laws of the universe are therefore not only abstract mathematical formulas, but expressions of a deep geometric structure. He argues that the formula he derived, with some transformations, leads back to the same mathematical structure identified by Pythagoras for musical octaves, though through a different theoretical path based on the symmetries of the universe. He then introduces another element, the number pi. He claims that the neurons in the brain are spaced according to multiples of pi, and that, if the universe is a fractal hologram, a hypothesis he considers plausible, humans, being part of the universe, would tend to recognize and resonate with its fundamental vibration. He recalls de Broglie's principle that everything vibrates at a certain frequency, sine wave. If everything vibrates, the brain vibrates as well. When we listen to a frequency close to what he defines as the fundamental frequency of the universe, which he identifies as 432 Hz, our neurons would more easily enter resonance, producing a sensation of harmony and engagement. He discusses the water present in the human body. Immersed in a vibrational field, water would oscillate coherently. This would lead to the so-called phenomenon of coherence, that is, the synchronization of oscillations between different parts of the brain. He emphasizes that, in his view, numerous scientific works in quantum physics and chemistry support these phenomena. Malanga argues that the preference for 432 Hz is not a New Age suggestion, but has a mathematical, geometric, and physical basis linked to the symmetrical structure of the universe and the vibrational nature of matter and the human brain. Malanga further explores the concept of quantum coherence applied to the brain. He explains that when a sound, i.e., information conveyed as vibration, enters the cerebral system, it can synchronize activity between the right and left hemispheres. When both perceive the universe in the same way at the same moment, a phenomenon of coherence is generated. The oscillations become synchronized. According to him, this coherence allows the brain to resonate with what he calls the true frequency of the universe. He stresses that, in his view, this is not mysticism but physics and geometry. He revisits the 432 Hz value, clarifying again that the mathematically significant value is not exactly 432, but 431.85 Hz. He introduces a numerical relation. 432 equals 360 multiplied by pi divided by the square of the golden ratio. He points out that this relation involves numbers he considers fundamental to the structure of the universe: pi, the golden ratio, phi, and Euler's number, E. He asserts that these numbers, irrational and with infinite decimal places, represent the true mathematics of the universe. In his vision, ordinary human mathematics, based on integers and conventional units of measurement, is merely a practical system for counting objects and does not coincide with the deep mathematics with which the universe was constructed. He claims that many fundamental physical constants, such as Planck's constant, the speed of light, and absolute temperature, exhibit numerical recurrences linked to 4.318, i.e., 431.8 on the same scale, suggesting the existence of a fundamental number connected to the universe's structure. Powers of 10, he says, depend only on human measurement units and have no intrinsic meaning. What matters is the recurrence of the coefficient 4.318. From this, he concludes that the human brain, being part of the universe and built according to its rules, would naturally recognize this vibration as familiar. All the molecules in the body, including water molecules, would vibrate at that fundamental frequency and its multiples and submultiples, harmonics and subharmonics. This is why music tuned around 432 Hz would be more pleasant. It would, according to him, be our music, the music with which the universe itself is structured. He suggests that these considerations could serve as the basis for constructing a Triad Sound Test, a sound test based on these fundamental frequencies, as a practical application of his theoretical hypotheses. Malanga explains that the Triad Sound Test was conceived as an evolution of the previous Triad Color Test, a mental exercise developed over roughly 20 years of work. The Triad Color Test required participants to close their eyes and visualize colors and internal images to regain self-awareness and consciousness. The problem, however, was that not everyone is visual. Some people cannot visualize colors or mental images. According to Malanga, this depends on specific neural pathways that do not allow the internal processing of visual information. It is not a defect, but a different brain configuration. From this idea arose the question, if not everyone can work with images, could an equivalent auditory pathway be constructed? According to him, the answer is yes. The goal thus became to transform the test from a visual to an auditory format, making it accessible even to those who cannot see within their mind. To achieve this, he initiated technical collaborations. He worked with a computer engineer, Riazzi, to mathematically model the problem, and consulted with Gilbert Finstrel from Milan, a developer of auditory therapy technologies, PT, that use sounds to alter states of consciousness. Malanga describes systems capable of generating three-dimensional, almost holographic sound experiences, giving the impression of a physical source that does not actually exist in space. Malanga recounts that the work on the Triad Sound Test spanned over 20 years, and that the first concrete results arrived when they decided to use frequencies with a precise mathematical meaning, linked to the value 431.85 Hz, approximated to 432 Hz. According to him, certain frequencies recur when analyzing phenomena in the universe. He cites, for example, the rotation of the galaxy and other quantities which, through mathematical transformations, octave transpositions, lead back to the value 4.318 or related numbers. He interprets these recurrences as evidence of a fundamental number connecting cosmic and microscopic scales. He also invokes the concept of a pattern, a sort of universal geometric template that, in his view, unconsciously recurs in human constructions and natural structures. On a technical level, he explains the difference between Finstrel's approach and theirs. Finstrel used 3 pink sounds, noise with a predominance of low frequencies, one for each ear and one combined. The brain, listening to these 3 chaotic signals, would integrate them to perceive a single coherent sound. In Malanga's interpretation, this process would reduce perceived entropy and increase internal coherence. Malanga and his group's idea is different. Instead of providing many chaotic sounds and leaving the brain to find the correct one, they aim directly for the single mathematically correct sound, connected to the algorithm based on 431.85 Hz. In this way, the need for complex equipment and sophisticated calibrations is avoided. A single precise tone is sufficient. According to him, this sound, which he believes he has identified, allows the brain to more easily enter the desired state, automatically facilitating what, in the Triad color test, required deliberate mental effort. The Triad Sound Test is an attempt to translate into a sound and mathematical form a path of awareness originally based on visualization, utilizing frequencies that Malanga considers connected to the fundamental structure of the universe. Malanga explains that the Triad Sound Test was initially conceived as a tool to address the phenomenon of alleged alien abductions. The idea was that a certain sound could disturb or drive away the alien presence in a person's mind. Over time, however, he says he revised this interpretation. The sound does not act directly against anything, nor does it replace the Triad color test. In his current view, the sound does not perform the work for the individual. Rather, it resonates with the water molecules present in the 2 cerebral hemispheres, synchronizing the right and left lobes. This synchronization generates a quantum field coherence that allows the components he defines as onemic and spiritual, symbolically located in the 2 hemispheres, to recognize each other and share the same map of reality. He uses a metaphor, as if 2 people who perceive the world differently were given the same pair of glasses and began to perceive reality in the same way. When the 2 hemispheres enter coherence, they no longer work in opposition but in the same direction. At that point, he says, it becomes possible to perform the act of will. This is the central point. No machine can replace an individual's will. The sound creates the conditions of coherence, but it is the person who must choose to engage and do the inner work, for example, correctly performing the triad color test. From this, he draws a broader conclusion. There is no technology to which one can delegate responsibility for personal growth or life. He maintains that the human being must remain the active agent in the process. In this context, he includes a critique of artificial intelligence, which, in his view, is not true intelligence, but a tool that risks replacing authentic human interaction with a machine-mediated relationship. Returning to the sound, he reiterates that the frequency linked to 431.85 Hz provides the key to effectively correlate the two cerebral hemispheres. He adds that studies exist, such as synchronized EEGs between mother and child during a lullaby, or between orchestra musicians and a conductor, showing that brains can spontaneously resonate when sharing a common sound field. According to him, the brain is already capable of synchronizing with the field that surrounds it. Their objective, however, is to identify the fundamental frequency of the universal field, not just a frequency that aligns the two hemispheres, but one that connects the individual to the universal field itself. He concludes by stating that they are currently experimenting with this frequency with results he considers positive, and that public information will soon be made available to allow people to try it for themselves. In this part of the talk, Corrado Malanga discusses the future public availability of the Triad Sound Test sound, which, he says, will be downloadable and usable by anyone for personal experimentation at home, following precise instructions. He provocatively imagines millions of Italians listening to that sound and, thanks to the new awareness acquired, ceasing to participate in the political system. However, he immediately tempers the idea. The potential exists, but what is almost always missing is the act of will. He emphasizes that in the Triad Sound Test, there is a precise moment when the sound calls the person to perform an act of conscious will. At that instant, one can choose to perform the Triad Color Test or ask one's consciousness to clarify a personal, relational, or existential issue. In his view, at that moment, the two cerebral hemispheres, which he symbolically associates with soul and spirit, male and female, stop rowing in opposite directions and enter into cooperation. This union is temporary, but sufficient to open a door to a broader state of consciousness. Even if, after the effect of the sound ends, the separation is restored, that moment of opening is not reversible because, he asserts, once consciousness is acquired, one cannot go completely back. He then introduces a new element that emerged during the research, a mathematical algorithm identified by a collaborator, which seems to describe the recurring structure of certain events in a person's life. The idea is that similar episodes, even years apart, are not random but connected by an underlying mathematical law. The algorithm is based on an expression of the type e raised to something, where that something corresponds to the numbers of the frequencies used in the Triad Sound Test. Malanga describes the graph of this function as the hand of a clock rotating in successive cycles without ever returning to exactly the same point, but shifting slightly each time. This image represents the personal time of the individual. In his interpretation, time does not flow uniformly. Its perceived speed changes with age and is also connected to gravity. At birth, an individual clock is activated, and over the course of life, some events tend to reoccur in progressively stretched cycles, first a year apart, then a year and a few months, then even later, as if following a temporal spiral. Within this structure, the number 432 would appear again, representing, for him, a fundamental frequency linked to the universe. He concludes by proposing a musical metaphor. Life would be like a composition with a beginning, development, and end, built on repetitive blocks similar to choruses. Music, he argues, unconsciously reflects the laws of the universe. And since the universe has a holographic and fractal structure, our existence would reproduce that same geometry. Life events would thus recur like musical themes, not identically but according to precise physics and geometry, forming a sort of personal score that we are still learning to decipher. In this part of the talk, Malanga revisits the holographic universe model to apply it directly to the structure of individual life. Returning to the clock image, he explains that if one takes a precise event, for example, a significant date, and places the hand at the corresponding angle within the graph, drawing a straight line will intersect the subsequent circles of the temporal spiral. At the points of intersection, related events would appear. The mathematical characteristic of these points, he claims, is that they share the same first derivative, that is, the same change in slope on the curve. Simply put, this means that seemingly different moments share the same structural variation in time. To clarify this idea, he references a concept from economics, the black swan, noting that very different phenomena, like a stock market crash and the occurrence of earthquakes, display different graphs, but with slope changes at the same points. In his interpretation, this indicates that very distant events are connected because the universe, as a hologram, vibrates at a common fundamental frequency. Everything that exists is a modulation of that same base vibration. Consequently, when the first derivative changes, it changes for the entire system simultaneously. From this, he concludes that the universe functions as a single large clock in which everything happens at the same instant, regulated by the same frequency. Applied to individual life, this would mean that whenever the same variation value is found on the personal graph constructed with the algorithm, the same type of event will reoccur. Life thus becomes like a song repeating according to precise patterns. When the chorus has appeared once, it will return again, and it would theoretically be possible to predict its recurrences by following the laws of the song, which coincide with the laws of the universe. He reiterates what he considers the fundamental points of his research: the frequency of 431.85 Hz, associated with the so-called 432 Hz, has a real and universal effect. The Triad Sound Test will be published, but still requires an act of will by the individual, and the ultimate goal remains to understand the structure of the universe to predict what has already happened. He recalls non-local universe theories to support the idea that everything exists in a single simultaneous space-time, possible, in his view, only if the universe is a fractal hologram. In this perspective, he even hypothesizes being close to an equation that would describe the universal fractal. In the following discussion, he evokes the idea of matter as solidified music and time as a pre-recorded vinyl, with consciousness being the needle that reads the grooves. Malanga closes by returning to physics and the cosmic microwave background radiation, interpreting it as the original sound of creation. He recounts transforming that signal into an image via software and observing two geometric sources, as if the universe were born from two speakers emitting a single primary vibration. In this part of the meeting, Malanga develops the theme of duality, linking it to quantum physics and the structure of the universe. Revisiting the idea of the stereophonic sound of cosmic origin, he suggests that consciousness initially separated into two poles, giving rise to reality as we know it. This primordial separation is reflected at every level of existence, in light and its opposite, in matter and antimatter, in chemical processes of binding and unbinding, in fullness and emptiness. He references analyses of the cosmic microwave background and the observation of two particularly cold and symmetrical points in the universe, interpreting them as traces of a dual origin. From this, he expands the discussion. Duality would be the fundamental principle that makes experience possible. Music, for example, is not made only of sounds but also of pauses. Without the silence between notes, no comprehensible melody would exist. Likewise, What we perceive as reality emerges from the alternation between presence and absence. He then connects this vision to Werner Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, arguing that the impossibility of simultaneously measuring position and momentum is not merely a technical limit, but a structural feature of conscious experience. In his interpretation, the brain functions as an instrument that focuses alternately on space-time and energy, somewhat like a Fourier transform, selecting one aspect of reality at a time. Uncertainty thus arises from the fact that the perceptual apparatus is unique and cannot make two complete measurements at the same instant. From this perspective, the universe is not truly quantized or fragmented. It is continuous and unified. It is the human brain that introduces discrete perception, creating the impression of separation between things. Between one note and another, between one object and another, there exists a continuous space that we do not perceive because our cognitive instruments cannot resolve it. Duality thus becomes an experiential tool, a necessary artifice to experience separation in a universe that, in itself, is one. The discussion then moves to intention and will. According to Malanga, one of the most common errors is aiming for the wrong result, seeking the effect rather than the cause. If a person wants to heal, he says, they should understand the origin of the malaise rather than focus only on recovery. Similarly, someone wanting to move an object with thought should not concentrate on the object itself, which is merely a holographic projection, but on the underlying structure that generates it. He even references the spoon scene in The Matrix as a symbolic example. It is not the spoon that bends, but perception that changes. He returns to the idea of cycles and historical loops. Even political or economic systems would be born and die following the same cyclical structure of the universe. Nothing is eternal. Every loop has a beginning and an end. An awareness of the underlying mathematical and geometric laws would allow, at least theoretically, understanding of its evolution. Towards the end, he addresses consciousness as a fundamental parameter of observation. The universe, he asserts, is not inherently indeterminate. Indeterminacy arises when consciousness intervenes as a measuring element. In this reading, the formulas of physics are not wrong, but incomplete if interpreted without considering the role of the observer. He concludes by returning to the central theme. Duality is not an ultimate feature of reality, but a perceptual mode necessary for experience. When consciousness recognizes its participation in the construction of reality, separation loses rigidity, and what previously appeared divided can be perceived as part of a single continuous structure. Corrado Malanga shifts the discussion to the theme of reality, time, and the so-called maps through which we interpret the world. He references the work on neuro-linguistic programming by Richard Bandler and John Grinder, emphasizing the difference between territory and map. The territory is the objective reality, while the map is the subjective representation each individual constructs through their own awareness. This, he asserts, explains why two people can observe the same individual and have completely opposite perceptions. The territory does not change, only the mental photograph we form of it. In the final farewell, a recurring idea in his thinking emerges: life as a temporary experience, almost a game traversed in a state of amnesia, at the end of which, he suggests, we will find ourselves understanding what now appears confused or hidden. See you soon on compelling topics. Keep questioning and stay curious.